Yeah, we are still with Aristotle discussing his aesthetic theories. In the discussions on aesthetics, what makes Aristotle so significant? When we consider the ancient classical Greek philosophers who dealt with aesthetic theories, Aristotle stands out. Look at the entire ancient classical Greek literature on aesthetics. You may find Peripoeticus by Aristotle or the Poetics of Aristotle. It remains the most outstanding text on aesthetics. In the past few lectures, we were trying to understand the book of Poetics and the aesthetic theories that it puts forward. And today, now we are going to look at the most remarkable contributions of Aristotle to the field of aesthetics in the book of Peripoeticus. As we already saw, the book of Poetics, only the first part of the book is available to us, and it is largely devoted to drama, especially tragedy. So the first part of the book which is extant to us, it is mostly dedicated to the discussions on tragedy. So the first of the most remarkable contributions of Aristotle to the field of aesthetics is his discussions on tragedy. He defines what tragedy is. He also lays down certain principles with which we may evaluate tragedy. And in his discussions on tragedy, he also integrates a positive social function of art. A positive social function of art, which he puts in a single term, catharsis. So catharsis, the discussions on catharsis, that is the second most remarkable contribution of Aristotle to aesthetics. In this lecture, we will be trying to understand in detail what is tragedy and also the concept of catharsis according to Aristotle. It is extremely important for us to understand tragedy and catharsis in the context of ancient Greek philosophy when we learn Western aesthetics. We also need to understand the application of the principle of catharsis in modern literary theories. So we have to understand the Aristotelian notion of tragedy and catharsis. As we already know by now, Plato, the master of Aristotle, he was very skeptical and so critical about artists and poets. He did not want poets in his republic unless they followed the dictates and regulations prescribed by the state. He believed that artists and poets would corrupt the minds of the youngsters. He hardly had anything positive about art, poetry, or artists and poets. He maintained a kind of antagonistic position towards art and poetry, and also to artists and poets. Therefore, he was not able to recognize the function of art. It is here Aristotle becomes so significant. Aristotle was an extreme antithesis to his master Plato. So the position of Aristotle was an extreme antithesis to the position of Plato with regard to art and poetry. He gives a history, he provides a history of poetry and drama in the book of Poetics. He also lays down certain principles with which we can evaluate drama and poetry. Aristotle discusses poetry in detail. He provides the historical evolution of different genres of poetry and of drama. He also lays down principles with which we may evaluate drama and poetry. And most importantly, he theorized the purpose or function of poetry, especially the purpose or function of tragedy in the book of Poetics. So understanding what catharsis is, how catharsis is experienced, is important in understanding the literary criticism of Aristotle and also its modern applications in the field of drama, in the field of cinema, in the field of literature, and also in the field of various other art forms. Let us begin the discussion on tragedy and catharsis, looking at the definition of tragedy. So we will look at the Aristotelian definition of tragedy. I will first read out the Aristotelian definition of tragedy for you and then try to explain and to make it more clear to you. Tragedy then is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete and of a certain magnitude in the language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play. In the form of action, not of narrative, through pity and fear affecting the proper purgation of these emotions. So this is the definition of tragedy according to Aristotle. I'll read again, I'll repeat. Tragedy then is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete and of a certain magnitude in the language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play. In the form of action, not of narrative, through pity and fear affecting the proper purgation of these emotions. So this is how Aristotle defines tragedy. An interesting thing about the definition of tragedy is he also integrates the purpose of tragedy in this definition. Purgation of emotion, which he calls catharsis. Now we will have a detailed look at the definition of tragedy. We will look more closely the Aristotelian definition of tragedy. Tragedy, according to Aristotle, is an imitation of an action. It's an imitation of an action. So action is something very important. We already referred to poetry as imitation of men in action. So merely imitating somebody does not make poetry or drama. It is the imitation of an action. So action is very important. Without action, there is no poetry, there is no drama, no tragedy. So action is an important term in the definition of tragedy. And it is not any action. When it comes to tragedy, it is an action that is serious. When we try to understand the distinction between tragedy and comedy, we said that tragedy is an imitation of a subject matter that is very serious, and comedy is an imitation of something that is very trivial. Tragedy is an imitation of higher type, whereas comedy is an imitation of lower type. Tragedy imitates men as better than they are, and comedy imitates them as worse than they are. So we understand the distinction between tragedy and comedy. So there he specifies it is an action that is serious. It's an imitation of an action that is serious. Again, he specifies it is the imitation of an action that is complete. Imitation of an action that is complete. What it means to be complete. It's an imitation of an action that is complete. And whole means when we say complete, there is a wholeness about that. WHOLE, whole. So it is a whole action as a whole. So when we say whole or complete, it should have a beginning, a middle and an end. Aristotle later explained these terms in the book of Poetics. So he explains that a whole is that which has a beginning, a middle and an end. So what is beginning? A beginning is that which does not itself follow anything by casual necessity, but after which something naturally is or something comes to be. So before a beginning there is nothing from which it can follow. But after this beginning, many other things consequently follows the beginning. So that is the beginning. And what is an end? On the contrary, the end is that which itself naturally follows some or the other thing. It follows from something else, either by necessity or as a rule. But there is nothing that follows it. So an end, we don't find anything after the end. It ends there. Nothing is followed from the end. But it naturally follows by necessity or rule something else. So it comes out of something else. It springs out of something else. So it is a continuity of something else that was before it. So what is a middle then? A middle is that which follows something and as some other follows it. So what a middle in a tragedy, it will be continued from something else. It follows something else and also something follows it. So for a tragedy to be said complete, or when we say tragedy is an imitation of an action that is complete, we mean there is a beginning, there is a middle and an end. So a well constructed plot therefore must neither begin nor end haphazard, but conform to these principles. So that is what Aristotle says about tragedy. When he says it is an imitation of an action that is serious and complete. And next he says about the magnitude. So any beautiful object should have a correct magnitude. A magnitude in proportion to the object. Aristotle gives the example of a living organism which is composed of parts. We know any living organism is composed of different parts. Any whole which is composed of parts must not only have an orderly arrangement, but it must have a certain magnitude. So the definition of beauty of the ancient classical period, and also it is seen in the medieval period also, it is traditionally understood as the orderly arrangements of parts. Beauty was defined as the orderly arrangement of parts. So he says a beautiful object, whether it be a living organism or any whole composed of parts, must not only have an orderly arrangement of parts, but must also have a certain magnitude. For beauty depends on magnitude and order. Beauty depends on magnitude and order. So hence a very small organism cannot be beautiful according to Aristotle. For the view is confused. We cannot configure what it is when it is too small. And when the object is too large, suppose an organism that is 2 miles long, you cannot comprehend it in one view. You cannot see it in one view. You cannot completely see it in a moment of time. You will have to go around in order to see it. So it takes a lot of time in order to comprehend what that object is. Such a thing cannot be beautiful according to the understanding of Aristotle. So something of vast size cannot be beautiful. Something of small size, too small a size also cannot be beautiful. So because if it is too small, you cannot see it. You have to see it in order to say that it is beautiful. If something is so vast, your eyes cannot take it all at once. The unity and sense of the whole is lost for the spectator when it is too large. For instance, if there were 1000 miles long object in front of you, you will not be able to comprehend it in one view. As in the case of animate bodies and organisms, we understand that a certain magnitude is necessary, and that magnitude which may be easily embraced in one view. So if we can embrace in our vision an object in one view, it is something beautiful. If it is too small, we cannot see it. If it is too large, we cannot comprehend it. So that such a thing which is too small and too large cannot be beautiful. Something of the correct magnitude which can be embraced in one view, which can be easily comprehended by our vision, is beautiful. In the same manner, in a tragedy, if it has a certain magnitude, a length proper to the narrative, then only it can be beautiful. If it is too small or too large, too long, it cannot be beautiful. So the certain magnitude for a tragedy is a narrative that can be embraced easily by our memory. A narrative that can be easily embraced in our memory. So that is the correct magnitude, he says, which the tragedy requires. So tragedy is an imitation of action that is serious and that has a correct magnitude. a certain magnitude. So, the Aristotelian definition of tragedy, he defines tragedy as an imitation of an action that is serious, that is complete, and an action that has a certain magnitude. And he continues to say, in a language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament. So what is this language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament? He refers to the different media of imitation. So he says, by language embellished, he means a language into which rhythm, harmony and song enter. A language into which rhythm, harmony and song enter. And the several kinds in separate parts. He means that some parts are rendered to the medium of verse alone, others again with the aid of song. So you find a particular media of imitation at one part of a tragedy, at another part you find some other kind of media through which that imitation is done. Like that, the language of tragedy is embellished with artistic ornaments, like different media of imitation. We already referred to them when we discussed the different media of imitation. Rhythm, harmony, music, meter, all of them constitute different media of imitation, and they are used in a tragedy at different times, one after another. Now one may be used, later some other media may be used. So that is how the language of tragedy is embellished with different media of imitation, and it is used at different times of the tragedy. At some part of the tragedy, one kind of media is used, or it is rendered through one kind of media. At some other part, it is rendered to some other kind of media. And again, in the definition, he refers to action in the form of action. Action becomes so important in a tragedy, and it is not a narrative. It is not something that is described. It is something that is enacted. So action is the most significant part of the tragedy. There should be action in order that it be a drama, in order that it be a tragedy. And we are entering into the last part of the definition of tragedy, where he states the positive function of art, a positive social function of art, which he terms as catharsis. He says, through pity and fear, affecting the proper purgation of these emotions. Through pity and fear, affecting the proper purgation of emotions. So he finds a positive social function of art. So it is good that you watch a tragedy. You experience the catharsis. So now you have to understand what catharsis is. What is catharsis? Do you know what is catharsis? We know he defines it as purgation of emotions. We know the literal meaning of it. But what is catharsis? How it happens? How it is operated in a tragedy? So that we have to understand. So what is catharsis? In Indian languages, we may say Vimalikarana. In Sanskrit, there is a word Vimalikarana or Vishodhana. In Pali language also it is there, Vishodhana. So sometimes we say Bhava Vishodhana. So I don't know if it is an exact translation of the word catharsis, but it's somewhere it is close to the word catharsis. It means cleansing, purification, or it also means purgation. So a similar term in Indian languages would be Vimalikarana or Bhava Vishodhana. So purgation of emotions, Bhava Vishodhana. Purgation is Vishodhana. Bhava Vishodhana is purgation of emotions. So what is catharsis and how catharsis happens? We have to understand that. Before we understand how catharsis happens, you must understand how tragedy functions, or how tragedy generates the effect of catharsis in the audience. So you have to look into that. So in order to understand that, you must know how a tragedy operates. So we'll just try to understand how a tragedy operates.